one semester, so I'm really excited about that. In terms of questions, I'm going to go for about 50 minutes of content and then save room for about 10 minutes of question and answer at the end. Usually I run that through the chat, so you can just post your question in the chat. I'll answer it. If it's a type of question where we want to do it live, then we can absolutely do that as well. So, whatever works for us at the end. But go ahead and save all those questions until the very end there. The other kind of housekeeping item I have is that because this is a presentation about mental health, this can be kind of personal for some people. It can be emotional, it can be deep. And so if at any time you need to take a break, you need to step away, please feel free to do that. You can mute me, you can turn me off, whatever you need to do, feel free to take that time for yourself. We're not going to be talking about anything super deep or gory or anything like that today. But again, because this is something that can be very personal for some people, please feel free to take that time if you need to. With that being said, I am going to share my screen. And another note about the privacy thing as well with the recording, I don't think any of your names or faces can be seen when I share my screen. So you should all be good on that account. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And we will get started. So one thing that we are going to be using a fair amount in this presentation today is the chat. I have been in college. I know what it's like to sit through lectures, and it's not generally very fun. And so I want to make this as engaging and entertaining for you guys as possible. So just to make sure that everyone knows where the chat is, knows how to operate the chat, can you let me know what year you are in? So first year, second year, if you've been there for more than 2 years, as well as what you are studying in the chat. That would be great, just so I can kind of get an idea of who we have here. And of course, if I'm reading any chat throughout this presentation, I won't attach anyone's name to it. So this is just, again, so I can kind of get an idea of who we have here and also make sure that everyone knows where the chat is as we use it throughout the presentation. So again, what year you are and then what you're studying in the chat. If you guys could do that, that would be fantastic. And I will make sure I got the rest of my stuff set up here. Okay, we got first year political science, awesome. Second year psychology, I love it. I studied psychology as well. Second year elementary education, I like that. My mom is an elementary school teacher, so I have a special place for elementary ed in my heart. Awesome, well, thank you guys. As you've probably noticed, if you've been looking at any of the marketing material for this event, today we're going to be talking about how you can safely and successfully support someone who's struggling with their mental health. This could be a friend, a family member, a classmate, someone who comes up to you and expresses that they maybe need some support. What should you say? What should you not say? How do you support them? How do you keep yourself safe in this process? That's what we're going to be talking about today. Now, before we dive too deep into that, I do want to give a little intro of myself so you know who I am and that you know that I kind of know what I'm talking about as well. Like Annie said, my name is Jessi Beyer, and I am a speaker and the #1 best-selling author of How to Heal, which is a book about natural and integrative trauma therapies. We're actually going to talk a little bit about some of the therapies in that book later in this presentation when we discuss how you can connect your loved one to resources if they need it. So you'll get a little sneak peek of that later today. I also am a speaker, as you can obviously tell, that's what I'm doing here. And I speak on a lot of college campuses, community colleges, four-year universities, Greek life, student government, kind of that whole gamut there, as well as some conferences on trauma and mental health, as well as things like workplace culture. Beyond that, though, I am a trauma and mental illness survivor. So not only do I teach from what I've learned in my degree program, what I've read, what I've interviewed experts about, but what I have experienced myself personally, both the things that I did correctly and the things that I did horribly incorrectly. Finally, I am a University of Minnesota alumnus, go Golden Gophers, and that is still probably the worst mascot we have in this country, so you guys have me beat for sure. Now, I want to start this presentation off with a story, and this story starts with this question. Have you ever eaten chicken off the floor? Now, you're probably like, okay, how does this have anything to do with mental health? But this is a really pivotal moment in my story. When I was a bit younger, I was in a relationship with someone who was really, really struggling. And after he opened up to me about everything that he was going through, I decided that I was going to be the bearer of all his problems. I was going to be his confidant. I was going to be the one that he went to for support. I was going to be the one responsible for keeping him happy and keeping him alive. Now, throughout this process, and in order to achieve that goal, I did everything I could for him. I gave him my time, I gave him my attention, I gave him my secrecy, I gave him my body, I gave him everything in this misguided belief that if I kept him happy and gave him what he wanted, he would continue to breathe. Now, I made him promise me one thing during this relationship, and that was that if he did decide to take his own life, he would give me a hug first. This served two purposes. One was so that I could know and I could do something about it to prevent it. And the second was that if I decided not to intervene, if I decided not to prevent that from happening, that I could be with him as he moved from this life into the next. You may be wondering why I would even consider not stopping it, especially after I had been so dedicated for years on keeping him alive and keeping him happy and doing everything I could for him. Well, alongside his struggles, my mental health was severely struggling as well. I was depressed, I was anxious, I was self-harming, I was struggling with food and my body image. All of those things were going wrong for me as well. Now, I don't blame him for any of my struggles, but I do believe that because of that relationship that we were in, both of us struggled. Both of us came out worse. And because of those struggles, I knew how angry and betrayed I would feel if he told on me, if he took away that opportunity for me to make that final decision at the end of my life. I knew if I intervened, there's a very good chance that he could hate me for the rest of his life. And I didn't know if I was willing to take that risk. One night, I had just gotten home from school and my parents were still at work. I got a text from him that said, "Can you come over and say goodbye?" Now, that was the one and only moment I've ever blacked out in my life. And I woke up and the chicken that I was eating for dinner was scattered on the floor around me. My heart was pounding out of my chest. And I got in my car and started to drive to his house. In that drive, I had the choice of whether I was going to call the cops and intervene or whether I was going to let him have this final decision and final control over his life. I chose to call the police and they intervened, let him out of the house in handcuffs, and ended up taking him to involuntary psychiatric hold. The next time that I heard from him after that night was a text, and it said, "I trusted you." That night broke me, and I don't think that my precarious mental state at the time really helped matters. After that night, I continued to struggle for years. It wasn't this immediate fix that I got over everything that happened. And like I hinted at before, I made a lot of mistakes when I was supporting him. I took on way too much responsibility. I took on way too much of a role in his life and his healing. And I truly believe that we both came out of that relationship worse because of it. Today, I want to share with you what I did incorrectly in that time, what I did right, everything I've learned since then, so that you don't have to go through that same pain and hurt and confusion that I did if someone you love is struggling with their mental health. There's going to be 3 parts to this presentation. The first part is going to be what not to say. So some of the most common things that we think of to say when someone we know and love is struggling are actually not very helpful. They can either hurt the person's healing journey or they can put up a wall between you two and allow you to not be a support system for them. After that comes part 2, where we're going to discuss some actionable strategies that you can use to be a good support system for someone. And we'll wrap it up with part 3, where we talk about how to keep yourself safe in the process. Now, in the first part of this presentation, we're going to do the most active part, the most participatory part of this presentation. I'm going to put a sentence up on the screen, something that you shouldn't say to someone who's struggling with their mental health. And I want you to think about how that sentence would make you feel if that's what I told you. So if you opened up to me about your mental health struggles, for example, and I responded with whatever the sentence is, would you feel angry? Would you feel dismissed? Would you feel unheard? Whatever that would make you feel, I want you to let me know in the chat box. The reason I want to have you guys do this and think on this is because I want you to have a little bit of an understanding of what your loved one might be feeling if you tell them this. Now, very few of these sentences are anything rude or insensitive or anything like that, but it's just the things that we commonly think of saying that may not actually be helpful. For example, if I put the sentence, "Bananas are the best fruit in the world," up on the screen, and you hate bananas, you hate bananas, you could feel disgusted and appalled and dismissed and unheard or any of those things. Go ahead and let me know what that would be in the chat box. Now, obviously, this is not going to be talking about bananas or any other fruit. That was just an example. But about, again, things you could say to someone when they open up about their mental health struggles. The first sentence I want to discuss is, "I know what you're going through." So perhaps you open up to me about a struggle with depression, for example, and that's a completely made up example. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I totally know what you're going through. I went through the same thing. This is my story," and just kind of launch into that. How would that make you feel? What would you want to say back to me in response if that was my answer to your mental health struggles? You can go ahead and let me know in the chat as well. And I know there's a bit of a delay between me speaking and the chat coming through, so I'll give it just a second. While you guys are typing as well, oftentimes I get dismissed, I get unheard, I get like they're trying to make it all about themselves. Kind of those feelings of just like, ugh. You know, now it's all about them. Here we go. We have, "I would feel ignored," that you wanted to be the center of attention. We have annoyed and annoyed. Double annoyed there, absolutely, right? And these are none of the things that you would want your loved one to feel if they are looking for support from you. We said it would feel like be slightly dismissed, 100%. Now, at the end of the day, unless you went through the exact same thing as this person, and you have the exact same psychological and physiological makeup as this person, you don't know what they're going through. Saying this can seem like you're kind of minimizing the effect of their struggles. Like, oh, it's no big deal. I went through the exact same thing and I came out totally fine on the other end of it. So it's all totally fine. For your loved one in this present moment, whatever they're struggling with is incredibly meaningful. It's hurtful, it's painful, it's scary, and more importantly, it's theirs. It's their emotions, it's their experiences. And even if they don't necessarily want it to be theirs, they own that part of their lives. For you to come in and take control of the conversation, take control of whatever struggles they may be going through, that can take that away from them during a time where a lot of their life may already feel out of control. The next sentence I want to discuss is, I'm so sorry for you. So perhaps you share with me that your mom just got diagnosed with breast cancer, for example, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry for you. How would that make you feel? Now, this is one of the sentences that most people are like, wait, I say this all the time. This isn't actually helpful. And it's not. I'm going to share with you why. It's not malicious. It's not malintended or anything like that, but it can seem a little bit empty, or like you don't know what else to say. We'll also talk about what this sentence can do to someone, how it can make them feel, and why it can devalue your apologies in general. But before we do that, let's see what the chat has to say. We had not acknowledged. Absolutely, this can make this person feel not acknowledged in whatever they've shared with you. Anyone else want to chime in before we move on? Pitied? Absolutely, Annie. That's what we're going to be talking about just in a second here. Sounds like it's talking down to the survivor, 100%. And then we have someone second pitying. They don't want to get deeper in that topic, so they say something quick. Absolutely, kind of shutting down the conversation and saying, no deeper. That's scary to go any deeper. Absolutely, you guys all hit the nail on the head there. When you tell someone that you're sorry for them, just like a couple people said, you give them pity. You label them as a victim and as someone requiring sympathy. Sympathy and empathy are two totally different things, and empathy is awesome. Sympathy is not so awesome. When you think of a victim, traditionally, you think of someone who's weak and helpless and in need of saving and incapable of taking care of themselves. And that kind of mindset is not a productive mindset to have as you're trying to heal from a mental illness. The other part of this is that I'm sorry's can become devalued. I'm of the opinion that you should only apologize when two criteria are met. The first of which is that you did something wrong. You did an action that caused another person harm. And the second part is that you have an intent to change your actions. You actually feel bad about what you did and don't want to do it again. When you apologize for someone's mental illness, you didn't cause their mental illness. You didn't cause their trauma. You had no play in that, right? And therefore you can have no intent of changing your actions. If you continue to apologize and apologize and apologize for things that you didn't necessarily do, if you're ever in a situation where you have to apologize, you actually messed up, that apology can seem kind of useless because that person knows that you just apologize for everything. That's the first word out of your mouth when you don't want to continue the conversation is, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Now, this is one of the ones that can be hardest to change because of how many times in our daily lives we apologize, especially for things we didn't necessarily do. As you're working to change your language when you're supporting someone, the first thing I want you to do is just recognize when you say it. Don't try to change it right away, but just recognize. Be like, oh, okay, I just caught myself there. I just said, I'm sorry. Okay, good to know. And then a little bit later, oh, I did it again. Okay, there we go. I'm acknowledging it. I'm recognizing it. And once you have that recognition down, that's when you can start to actually make changes. That's when you can correct your words before they come out of your mouth. And then it becomes habit to not even say them anymore at all. The next phrase I want to discuss is it could be worse. Now, this is the starving children in Africa argument. Essentially that because someone else out there in the world has it worse than you do, you have no right to struggle, you have no right to be in pain, and how dare you because someone else has it worse. How would this make you feel? Again, you open up to me about something you're struggling with, and I'm like, well, it could be worse, right? It could be worse because there's a war going on over here. It could be worse because you still have a roof over your head or something like that. How would that make you feel? Go ahead and let me know that in the chat box, guys. Invalidated, absolutely. Dismissed and angry, 100%. Absolutely. And a lot of the responses that I get with this are kind of that, so what, right? Like, so what someone else has it worse? Does that really mean that I can't struggle and that I can't be not okay because I happen to have a roof over my head and money in my bank account? Mental illness is not picky. You guys, it doesn't care whether you have a roof over your head or you have a nice car or you don't even have a car at all. It affects everyone, right? And sure, there are some correlations between SES and mental illness, but in general, just because you have good things in your life does not mean you're immune from mental illness. What this does when you tell someone this, beyond invalidating what they're going through, is it makes them feel like their emotions and their reactions are over the top, unwarranted, and overdramatic. Again, not a productive mindset to have as you're trying to heal from mental illness. In general, it is completely useless to compare the severity of mental illness because at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. One of my favorite sentences, I don't know who said this quote, but it goes something like this. The person who drowned in 1 foot of water and the person who drowned in 20 feet of water are both dead. And that's exactly true. It doesn't matter whether one person is drowning in a mild mental illness or they're drowning in a severe mental illness. Both are drowning, both are struggling, and both are in need of support. Anyone who's struggling with their mental health. It doesn't matter whether it's clinically severe, whether it's test anxiety versus an anxiety disorder, whether it's you stubbed your toe and broke your toe versus you fell down the stairs and broke every bone in your body. It doesn't matter what the cause or the severity is. It matters that your loved one is struggling and they've expressed to you that they're looking for support. The next sentence I want to discuss is it'll be okay. Now, as you guys are thinking of how this would make you feel, I want to tell you a story about a friend of mine who lost her father when she was 7. She distinctly remembers every one of her family members, everyone who came in from out of town, everyone who's at the funeral, coming up and telling her, it'll be okay. It'll be okay. It'll be okay. It'll be okay. And all she needed in that present moment was someone to tell her that it was okay to not be okay right then. She was just a little kid. She was a first grader. She just lost her father. And instead of all these adults coming in and telling her, it'll be okay, she needed to know that it was okay to not be okay in this present moment. And that's the importance of discussing this particular sentence. Again, this is something that can be very well-intentioned, right? You want to reassure this person that it will be okay down the road and that they can push through and kind of the light at the end of the tunnel, but it's not as helpful as you may think. Now that you guys have had a couple seconds to think, how would this make you feel, right? I would feel like I shouldn't take as much care of my own, that was for the last one, but I would feel like I shouldn't take as much care of my own health because someone else has it worse. That's really powerful as well. You may not even think that it's worth healing or trying to heal because someone else has it worse. That's really powerful. Thank you for sharing. Let's see. Yeah, with this sentence, it'll be okay. Ignored, like the person wasn't comfortable, dismissed. Okay is subjective and dismissive of the one struggling. Absolutely. And that okay is subjective part is something we're going to chat about right now. So it might not be okay. Okay, it really might not be okay, or it might not be okay for a very long time. And either of those two outcomes are completely okay. What this does when you tell someone this is it places them on this imaginary timeline to healing. Like, okay, we're here now, and then we're going to get to okay, and then everything goes back to normal, and we can forget this ever happened. It doesn't quite work like that. Healing is not linear. It does not work on any timeline that you want to put it on. Every individual needs to work through their healing process at their own rate. If that takes them a week, if it takes them a year, if it takes them half their life, that is okay as well. What this also tells the survivor is that everything goes back to normal once they're done healing. And that's often not the case. Going through something so deep and emotional as a mental illness or as a trauma or as a loss can completely change a person. Not all of those changes are for the worse, right? I came out of my mental illness so much stronger and so much more empathetic than I ever would have become if I didn't have that relationship in my life. But I am not the same person that walked into that relationship. I am vastly different. If you tell someone this, they think that their healing journey ends when they become okay again, but specifically the okay that they were before whatever this thing is happened. They may work and work and work to heal with this goal of becoming the previous okay again. And then when they don't reach it, they may give up hope in the healing process altogether. That's the last thing you want to do is help them believe that there's no hope for healing. And unfortunately, telling someone this can kind of lead them down that path. Again, you need to allow them to feel their pain for as long as they need and reach whatever okay is at the end of their journey. The next one, and this is one of my favorite ones to discuss because it gets everyone riled up, is they didn't mean to hurt you. Now, this one is specific to survivors of some sort of interpersonal assault, perhaps a sexual assault, a mugging, something like that. Perhaps you open up to me and say, I got mugged on my way home from school, and I'm like, well, John was a good person. He didn't mean to hurt you. How would that make you feel, right? A lot of people get super angry. I know I'm smiling right now, but I love how fired up people get. They get super angry. They're like, who cares that John was a good person? I'm hurt. And that's exactly what we're going to dig into. Now, as you guys are typing your responses to how this would make you feel, I want to give you a little bit of a metaphor. If I wanted to give you 1,000 pounds of gold, which yesterday I think I looked it up and it was worth something like $28.5 million. So if I wanted to give you 1,000 pounds of gold and make you the richest person on your campus, but I accidentally dropped it on your head, you would still be hurt. You would still be in need of healing, and I would still be in the wrong. It doesn't matter that I had the best intentions of giving you $28.5 million. It matters that I dropped 1,000 pounds on your head. Now, a lot of times people who are the perpetrators of trauma do not have as good of intentions as me giving you 1,000 pounds of gold. But the point of the message is still the same. It doesn't matter the intention of me or the person perpetrating the trauma. We have really angry allows unhealthy/toxic behaviors to be normalized in society. Absolutely. Like they're trying to defend the person, that their intention matters more than my hurt. It's defensive to the perpetrator. Absolutely. Angry as they are ignoring the behavior of someone who might have hurt me. 100%. This would just tick you off, right? Like, who cares? I'm hurt. That's what matters right now. And that's exactly what I'm going to say. For trauma survivors specifically, like I said, when someone caused a hurt of another person, the focus of the healing journey is not on the person who caused the harm. It's on the person who's experiencing the harm, who's experiencing the trauma, and who's healing from all of that. It really doesn't matter the intentions of the person. It really doesn't. I can't say this too many different ways, but it doesn't matter the intention of the person. The person who experienced this trauma, your loved one, is deeply hurt and they're in need of support. And that is what you need to focus on as the person who is supporting them. The next one we're going to discuss is get over it. Now, frankly, this is rude and insensitive, but every single one of these sentences that I'm going to share, including this one, including the last one, and including every other one that we've discussed so far, is something that I personally have been told when I've opened up to someone about my mental health. Sometimes this has been a family member, sometimes it's been my parents, sometimes it's been a friend, but someone close to me has responded with these sentences. I hope that none of you would ever say this to someone, and neither the last one as well. But because these are things that I have heard and things that have hurt me, I want to talk about them in depth with you just to make sure you understand what this could really do to someone. Now, as you guys are typing out your answers here, what I want you to understand about this is it does two bad things. Not only is it harmful to the person who is hurting and who's struggling with their mental health, but it's also detrimental to your relationship. You are now no longer a support system for them. This sentence, it puts up a giant brick wall between you and the person you love. By telling them this, again, you're telling them that their feelings are too dramatic and they're taking too long to deal with what happened to them. Every single healing journey is unique. Like I said, it's unique in its pattern, it's unique in its length, and you have no way of knowing how far along someone is in their healing journey. Perhaps you think this is something new for them, when in fact they've been working and healing and trying for 5 or 10 years. By telling them this, you just invalidated all of that work that they already did along their healing journey. Now, I saw a couple chats come through here, so let me see here. We have, I'd be angry and no longer confide in them. Absolutely, right? There's that brick wall. You are now no longer a support system for them. Really angry and invalidated again, unsupported and invalidated, no longer open up to them if that's their way of supporting. Absolutely, right? We just hit both of those things on the head. It hurts and it puts up a brick wall between you and them. The second to last one we're going to discuss is the idea of pushing them to open up, right? Come on, you should really talk about it. It'll feel better when you just get it out in the open. Oh, why don't you just tell me what happened or what's going on with you? This general idea, again, of digging for their story when they're not necessarily willing to tell you. How would that make you feel if that was my response? You open up to me perhaps and say, hey, Jessi, you know, I started seeing a therapist because I'm struggling with anxiety. And I'm like, well, tell me about it. Like, what does it feel like? Will you tell me when it started? What's it like? Tell me. How would that make you feel if that was my response? Go ahead and let me know that in the chat box. And again, this is the second to last one, guys, so I'll let you sit back and relax in just a second here. We have disrespected and like a case study. That's powerful, like a case study. I'd close off even more, 100%, right? It's kind of like parenting a teenager. I've never parented a teenager, but from what I've read about parenting a teenager and what I've been a teenager before, is that the more you push and the more you push, and the more you try to get them to do something, the more they pull away, the more they resist, right? And that's what's going to happen with this. We also said a huge breach of privacy. It's the trust that I need to have with them where'd we go? Okay, here we go. It's the trust that I need to have with them to open up, so I'd be annoyed. It makes one feel like the person doesn't know what they're asking for and wouldn't actually want to know more. Yeah, I like that. I don't think anyone has said that before, so thank you for sharing that. I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again here. Everyone processes their struggles at their own rate, okay? And having you sitting there and bugging them to talk about it could force them to speak when they're not ready, or it could do that brick wall again and push you away from them as a support system. When you push them to take that step and open up and talk about their story before they're ready, it could be anywhere from impossible to destructive. What do I mean by that? Well, impossible, they won't do it, right? They'll clam up, they'll resist, they'll shut down. Or destructive in the sense that opening up about your story can actually be re-traumatizing. And I'm sure that's the last thing you want to do if you're trying to support someone you love. You also need to ask yourself what your motives are if you find yourself reacting this way. Why do you actually want to support them? Why do you have to know what went wrong with them? That's something you need to think about, again, if you find yourself reacting this way. The last one we're going to discuss is the concept of suggesting a healing method. So have you gone on a run today? You should try yoga. Here's a meditation app. It fixed everything for me. This idea, again, of kind of shoving healing methods at them and saying, oh, this is the be all and end all. It fixed everything for me. Now, the problem with this, and as you guys are typing out your thoughts to how this would make you feel, the problem with this is that you are not necessarily qualified to give this information. Your role as the friend or family member is to be there for them and love them and support them, not give them advice on how to heal. If you don't have the necessary training, you aren't qualified to give them this level of advice. And this isn't to shut anyone down or tell you that whatever worked for you is wrong or bad or anything like that. But the risk you run is that by suggesting what worked for you, you may be giving them a false sense of hope, or maybe even suggesting something that could be harmful for them. Two stories with this. Number one is that concept of giving them false hope. Let's say, for example, that when you were struggling with anxiety, this meditation app fixed everything. And it was the best, it cured everything, and it worked so well for you. And you suggest this to your friend who also has an anxiety disorder. This friend tries that meditation app and it does nothing. It doesn't work. It gives them no help. They can't do it. It doesn't work at all. Now their ability in healing, their faith in their ability to heal is completely dashed because they tried the thing that should have fixed all their problems and it didn't work. So maybe they're just broken and they're never going to be able to heal. That has happened. Okay. That is a mindset that can be very common when you suggest something and it doesn't work for someone. The other thing that may happen is that the method of healing you suggest can actually be detrimental. This story was told to me by a woman named Barbara, and she's a dance movement therapist. This is a story of her client before he was her client, and he was struggling with PTSD. One of his friends suggested that he go to this crazy dance party thing that was supposed to release all the emotions and trapped energy and things like that. So he went, right? The friend attested to it, and so he went. And in the middle of that crazy dance party, he started having a psychotic break. The person who was leading the crazy dance party didn't recognize it, couldn't help him. The people that were there didn't recognize, couldn't help him. And that instance set him back multiple steps on his healing journey. Now that's a pretty dramatic example, right? I'm not saying that everything you suggest is going to result in your friend having a psychotic break, but it's important to understand that everyone reacts to situations and healing methods very differently. And so what worked for you may not only not work for your friend, but may actually harm their healing journey as well. Some of the chats came through, said, let's see, if I didn't ask for your advice, I don't want it. You're not there to fix me. Absolutely, 100%. Everyone is different. Yes. Annoyed because they're acting like I need to be fixed and they don't know what I'm comfortable with. Absolutely, right? And the victim may have already tried the advice, so the advice can make it seem as if the victim is unrepairable or cannot heal. You took the words right out of my mouth. I love it, right? You guys totally hit the nail on the head with that. You, like I said, also can run the risk of harming that healing journey as well as setting them back, right? And making them believe that their healing journey is impossible, that they don't have what it takes, that nothing is going to work for them, so why even try? Absolutely. Now, we've talked about what not to say, okay? And the fact of the matter is, when you're supporting someone, it's not about what you say, it's about what you do and how you show up for them in their lives. That being said, I did want to give you 2 things you can say if you really feel that words are necessary. And these are things that can be very supportive, can be helpful, and may feel a little bit awkward. So again, it takes some time to adjust the common things that come out of your mouth when you're supporting someone. The first sentence is, my heart hurts for you. And a lot of people are like, that's so sappy. I'm not going to say that. That's so sappy. And that's totally your choice. It is a little bit sappy, but it's a very powerful sentence. Having someone you love struggle with their mental health can be hurtful for you as well. And that hurt is just as legitimate as their hurt. This sentence does not take over the hurt and not say, oh my gosh, I'm so sad and this is so awful, and make it all about you, like we talked about at the very beginning. But what this does is it lets this person know that you are recognizing the pain and the hurt that they're sharing with you, recognizing that that is very real to them. That is deep, that is their truth, and you are receiving that, you are accepting that, you are acknowledging that, instead of dismissing it or trying to minimize any of the hurt that they're going through. The next one, and this is perhaps my favorite sentence in the English language, is, I hear you and I'm here for you. The first part of this, I hear you, it does a very similar thing. It lets this person know that what they're sharing with you is received, acknowledged, heard, you are listening, they are heard, right? That's very powerful because a lot of people with mental illness don't feel heard. They don't feel understood. And the first part of this sentence lets them know that they are. The second part, I'm here for you. It lets this person know that they have someone on their team. They have someone on their side that's going to walk this journey with them. And a lot of times that's really what people are looking for when they ask for support from a loved one. Now, part 2 of this presentation, we're done with the chat, so you guys put your fingers away for a little bit. But the second part of this presentation is about what you can do, how to support someone. What are the strategies that you can use so you don't have to rely on your words? The very first thing we need to discuss is that you have to sort yourself out first. You have to get your motives in line. And we touched on this briefly when we discussed why pushing someone to open up isn't necessarily a good thing to do. In order to be a good support system, in order to be that good friend and actually be helpful in their healing journey, you have to have yourself sorted out first. This is not step 2. This is not the last step. This is the first step, okay? You need to ask yourself if you're trying to help your friend or family member because you love them and care about them and want to see them heal, or if you're trying to help them because you're curious and you want to feed the gossip mill and you kind of have this morbid curiosity to know what's wrong with them, right? This like scientific poking, prodding sort of brain. If you find yourself in the wrong motive, if you find that, ooh, maybe I'm not really helping them here. Maybe I am just trying to satisfy my own curiosity. There are some things you can do. First of all, if they invite you, you can absolutely go and partake in a therapy session with them. A lot of therapists, especially in the natural and integrative fields, will invite family members and close friends into the process pretty early on because they recognize that you can't heal in a broken home environment. If this happens, if they invite you, absolutely go. That might be the bridge between where you are and being the support system that you want to be. If that doesn't happen, they may also come to you with some type of homework, maybe a letter they want to read you, a journal prompt, a discussion prompt, something like that. And again, take this seriously. This is just as important as any homework you might do for school or work, perhaps even more so. And again, this could be that bridge between where you are and where you want to be as a support system for them. Finally, if none of those things happen, if they don't invite you to a therapy session, if they don't come to you with any sort of homework, you can absolutely go seek help for yourself. Not only will that therapist give you the tools and tips and tricks you need to be a good support system, but it's also a very humble and selfless approach to supporting someone else. And that goes a long way. Once that's done, once you make sure that you are ready to be a good support system for them, the first thing you need to do is validate their emotions because they probably already feel crazy. Now, I hate using the C word to describe anyone, particularly anyone with mental illness, but crazy is what I call myself a lot. I call myself crazy. I call myself dramatic. I call myself out of control. And I wondered why I couldn't just get it together in my head. Your friend or family member, as they're healing, a lot of emotions are coming up. A lot of memories are coming up. And a lot of them are probably pretty painful for this person to experience. Because of that, and also because of whatever mental illness they have, they probably feel kind of out of control. Their emotions are running crazy, their thoughts are running crazy, and it may feel like life is happening to them instead of them controlling their life. For you to come in and say, hey, it's okay. Everything that you are feeling right now is perfectly okay to feel. that takes a lot of that pressure and judgment and shame off of their shoulders and allows them to direct that energy into the healing journey instead of into judging themselves. Next, you need to treat them as normally as possible because they are still your loved one. They are still the exact same person. They've just opened up about a new side of themselves to you. Someone who's struggling with their mental health is not broken. They're not weak. They're not about to break either. And they don't need to be treated with any sort of kid gloves or protected from the wrongs of the world. Whatever you normally do with that person, continue to do so. Continue to invite them out to social events. Continue your Sunday morning coffee date. Continue complaining about your annoying relationship. Whatever it is, continue to do so. I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but there have definitely been instances in my life where I walk into a room of friends or family members and it all just goes dead silent. And everyone's looking at you and you're like, okay. And all of a sudden someone is like, hi, let me get you a drink and get a seat and let me get you a plate of food. And they just start to be really catering to you because they don't think you can do anything yourselves. Not only is that a little bit insulting, but it makes you feel even more abnormal during a time of your life that already feels so abnormal and out of control. By treating them as normally as possible, and of course, examining any sort of toxic habits you may have in that relationship, but generally treating them as normally as possible, you give them that sense of normalcy, which can be that first piece, that catalyst into bringing them back to a life that is normal. We talked about normal before and after, but generally normal, where they're not struggling with their mental health all the time. The next thing I want to discuss is holding the space. And this, if you take nothing else from this presentation, this is what I want you to take away, because this is probably the most powerful thing that you can do for them. I'm going to read this definition to you of holding the space. And this was written by a woman named Heather Plett. She's a coach who holds space for people as they undergo personal development journeys. And this is by far the most beautiful definition of holding the space that I have ever read. She says that holding the space means being willing to walk alongside another person in whatever journey they're on without judging them, making them feel inadequate, trying to fix them, or trying to impact the outcome. When we hold space for other people, we open our hearts, offer unconditional support, and let go of judgment and control. Now let that sit for just a second, how powerful that definition is and how clearly it paints the picture of what it means to hold the space for someone. Another way that you can look at this is that you have to choose to sit in the dumpster with them, even if you want to get right out. What do I mean by that? Well, this story was told to me by a woman named Sally, and she's an equine assisted therapist. She was working with a young client on the farm who was struggling with PTSD, and they were playing hide and seek with a group of other young clients. Now this girl looks at Sally and she's like, hey, Sally, let's go hide in the dumpster. And okay, Sally, they go and they hide in the dumpster, and it's a dumpster, right? It's dark, it's smelly, it's gross. There's something dripping over their shoulder, and it's just not a fun place to be. Now this girl looks at Sally and she says, hey, Sal, this is kind of like life, isn't it? Now that moment hit Sally so hard because for that little girl, that's what her life was like. It was dark, it was smelly, it was not a fun place to be, and she couldn't just get out whenever she wanted to because of her mental illness. Now for Sally, she could have hopped out of the literal or proverbial dumpster whenever she wanted to, but by choosing to sit there in that girl's darkness with her and let her know that she wasn't alone, that's what it means to hold the space. That moment for that little girl was so powerful for her because then she knew she wasn't alone. She wasn't going to scare anyone away with the depth of her struggles. And that, again, is the epitome of what it means to hold the space for someone. Now, holding the space is a bit of a nebulous concept, so I wanted to give you 8 steps that you can use when you're holding the space for someone. The first is intuition. Trust your intuition in terms of how you relate with them, and also give them permission to trust theirs. Remember, they're still the exact same person, and their intuition is working just fine. Next, don't overwhelm them with information. It can be really, really tempting to shove books and pamphlets and blog posts and all these different things at them that you think may help them. But what that can do is it can give the impression that there's so much to do on the healing journey. There is, right? There's a lot that goes into healing from mental illness. But if they feel so overwhelmed at the start, they may not even take that first step. And that's the last thing you want to do. After that, you need to allow them to keep their autonomy. Again, they're still the exact same person, so they need to be able to make decisions for themselves and have control over their own lives. The only caveat here is if it is something like a dangerous addiction or a life-threatening situation, please step in. Don't have the internal debate that I did when I was younger. But in general, don't come in and take over their lives either. Next, and this is one of the most important ones, one of the ones that I did horribly wrong. Their failure is not your failure. So keep your ego out of it. If they have a flashback, if they have a panic attack, if they get triggered, if they struggle, whatever that is not a reflection on your ability to be a good support system for them or on your ability to hold the space for them. Their journey, even though you want it to go like this, is gonna go like this. And all the ups and downs, again, are not a reflection of how good of a support system you are. Next, and this is pretty much the basis of holding the space, you wanna create a safe space for this person. You don't want them to be afraid of judgment or shame or criticism if they fail, if they cry, if they have a setback. You wanna be that space that they can come as they are and get support, no matter what state they're in. After that, make sure you're offering help in a way that doesn't make them feel incompetent or inadequate. Again, you don't want to come in and just take over their lives and do everything for them, right? You want to treat them as normally as possible. And yes, you can help them, you can support them, you can pick up dinner when normally they would pick up dinner. But in general, don't come in and just micromanage and do everything for them. Next, make sure that they know that you are able and willing to catch them if and when they may fall apart. Now, this is not you coming in every single day and saying, I got you, I got you, I got you, because that's just annoying. But if you show up with strength and compassion and empathy, that willingness to catch them will show up through your mannerisms. And that's really all you need to do. The final part of this ties into the help and the autonomy pieces of this. And that is that you need to allow them to make their own choices, even if those choices are different than the ones you would have made. For example, they may choose to eat differently, to exercise or not to exercise, or choose a different method of therapy than you would have picked if you were in their position. Remember, it's not your decision how they run their life or how they run their healing journey. You are there to support them, not to backseat drive for them. The final thing we're going to discuss in terms of how you can be a good support system for them is connecting them to resources, because you cannot do it all. You play an incredibly important role in your loved one's healing, but you are not a mental health professional. If they would like some additional help, if they would like that different level of support, you can absolutely connect them to licensed mental health professionals near you. Now, you may be thinking, how do I find those people? How do I know that they're certified? How do I know that they're going to be good? That's what we're going to talk about. Over the next couple of slides, I'm going to share 10 different types of therapy that you can refer your loved one to, as well as how to find certified therapists in those various fields. The first one we're going to discuss is talk therapy, and this is pretty much what everyone thinks of when they think of therapy. This is things like cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, pretty much anything where you're sitting and talking with a therapist about struggles. Now, there's a huge database of therapists at psychologytoday.com, and you can sort by age, by gender, by specialization, all these different things. So that is a great resource to start with if you're not really sure where to begin searching for someone to refer your loved one to. The next type of therapy I want to discuss is EMDR, which stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. EMDR uses bilateral stimulation, which is moving a hand back and forth in front of the face, in order to reprogram incorrectly stored memories. All therapists that are certified in EMDR can be found at emdria.org. That's the EMDR International Association. Next is craniosacral therapy. And despite the picture, it is not massage. Craniosacral therapy harnesses the body's natural healing mechanisms, which heal things like cuts and bruises and broken bones, in order to heal mental illness as well. The practitioner will lay the hands on the body, feel the craniosacral rhythm, which is a rolling sensation in responses to changes in the cerebrospinal fluid levels, and find where that energy, that rhythm is caught up or stuck. Then they'll apply about 0.5 gram of pressure, very, very little pressure, to mimic the pressure that the body is exerting and allow that stuck energy to be released. There is no one certifying body for craniosacral therapy, but a database of practitioners can be found at iahp.com. After that is mindfulness and meditation. And this isn't as much a therapy as much as it is an addition to therapy, or a practice that can go alongside therapy. Mindfulness and meditation are fantastic for a lot of different things, including just everyday life and personal development. But for mental illness specifically, mindfulness and meditation are great for training the brain to come back to the same spot over and over again. That way, when your loved one has a panic attack, or they get triggered, or they have a dissociative episode, their brain, just like a muscle, is already trained to come back to present. That will make the return from those types of episodes easier and smoother for your loved one. There is no one certifying body for mindfulness or meditation, So just look for standard mental health credentials like LCSWs, which are licensed clinical social workers, LPCs, which are licensed professional counselors, and of course your PhDs and your MDs, and then just find a therapist that also uses mindfulness and meditation in their practice. Next is dance movement therapy, and no, it is not traditional dance, so you or your loved one will not be expected to tango across the room to heal from any mental illness they may be struggling with. Dance movement therapy is a creative arts therapy that provides the space for the person to listen to their body, listen to how their body wants to move, and allow it to move in that manner. Therapists in this type of therapy can be found at adta.org, which is the American Dance Therapy Association, and there are 2 levels of therapists depending on how much training they've had. You can also sort by those levels when you're searching for a therapist near you. Next up is trauma-sensitive yoga, and this is fantastic for individuals that have some sort of struggle with their body. It could be an eating disorder, it could be some sort of physical trauma, it could be any sort of interpersonal assault that they may be struggling with. But the goal of trauma-sensitive yoga is to provide a space for the individual to learn to listen to their body again, make choices for their body instead of having choices made on their behalf, and also recognize and trust the signs and signals that their body is giving them. Do I want to lean into this stretch more? Is this too much? Do I need to modify this? Do I need to leave the room entirely? Those are some of the options that people in trauma-sensitive yoga have. Now, the term trauma-sensitive yoga specifically pertains to classes and individuals that are certified under the JRI Trauma Center in Boston. The JRI Trauma Center is the group that founded trauma-sensitive yoga, and all of their certified therapists can be found at traumasensitiveyoga.com. If you see a class that's perhaps titled Yoga for Mental Health or Yoga for Trauma Healing or something like that, that means that that person is likely not certified under the JRI Trauma Center. That does not mean that the class is worthless or useless or bad, but it does mean that you have to do a little bit more legwork in terms of looking at their credentials and making sure that they have the training necessary to support your loved one through the mental health part of their yoga journey. Next up is equine assisted therapy, and there are 2 main types of equine assisted therapy. The first is EGALA therapy, and that therapy uses metaphors and movement of a scene of horses and props in front of the person in order to work on their mental illness. The second type is Epona, and Epona uses movement, some simple riding activities like sitting on the horse or lying down on the horse, as well as mindfulness activities like stretching or yoga with the horse in order to work on mental illness. Therapists in the EGALA model can be found at eagala.org, and therapists in the Epona model can be found at eponaquest.com. That's eponaquest.com. After that, I'd like to briefly talk about canine assisted therapy, which is essentially the incorporation of dogs into the therapy process. Now, I'm a huge dog person. My dog is on the floor next to me, curled up in a little ball, but dogs are fantastic for the therapy process for a variety of reasons. First of all, they can help break the ice. I don't know about you guys, but when I go to a party before COVID happened, I would be in the corner petting the dog and kind of ignoring the people instead of being in the middle of the people. Dogs are great at that. They're also great at regulating the process at which this person's story comes out. We don't want it to come out too quickly, but we also need it to come out, at a pace that's good for them and the therapist. And dogs can help regulate that process. Finally, dogs can also be great for mindfulness activities like taking it for a walk or grooming it to, again, train that brain to come back to center and to provide some tactile stimulation throughout the therapy process. There is no one certifying body for canine assisted therapy, but there is a list of canine therapy training organizations at akc.org, which is the American Kennel Club. Those organizations will not offer canine assisted therapy, but they may be able to connect you to graduates that do offer canine assisted therapy. The second to last therapy we're going to discuss is ecotherapy. And ecotherapy is simply the incorporation of nature into the therapy process. Specifically, it's the use of metaphors in terms of what you see and hear and smell and taste and touch in nature to facilitate that healing conversation with the therapist. Again, there is no one certifying body for ecotherapy, so make sure you're checking the credentials of this person and look for the same type of credentials that we mentioned previously. Finally, I'd like to talk briefly about flower essence therapy. Now, flower essence therapy is a new field in the United States, which means unfortunately that it's less regulated and less common than other types of therapy. That being said, it is incorporated into standardized healthcare in places like Brazil, Switzerland, and Cuba, and you can buy flower essence bottles at pretty much every corner pharmacy in Spain. That's all to say that it's not a new therapy, period, but it is new in the United States. If you do find a flower essence therapist for your loved one, make sure that they have multiple years of training or that they've been mentored by an experienced flower essence therapist. You can also get rescue remedies, which are individual bottles that can be used in acute situations at directlyfromnature.com. Now, flower essence therapy specifically works by using the resonance in flowers to activate the body's natural healing mechanism, the same mechanism that gets activated in craniosacral therapy. Flower essence therapy is also great at addressing kind of the surface level things, the anger, the fight or flight response, and allowing those to release so that more energy and more pure energy can be directed on the healing process that lies beneath. Now, the third part of this presentation that I briefly want to cover before we move into question and answer is how to keep yourself safe during this process. Again, I don't blame the person that I was in a relationship with for any of my mental health struggles, but I do know that I drug myself over his jagged edges. This resulted in a lot of resentment and codependency building up between us. And like I said, my mental health severely struggled for years after that pivotal night. Beyond that, though, I truly believe that I could have been a better support system for him if I took better care of myself. So this is not a purely selfless measure in terms of keeping yourself safe. There's three main ways that you can support yourself during the healing process. The first of which is seek your own help, okay? There is absolutely no shame in getting your own therapist or mental health professional to help you work through this process. Also, make sure that someone is holding the space for you, okay? Just because you're holding the space for someone does not mean that someone can't hold the space for you. It's a chain. One person holds it for another, who holds it for another, who holds it for another, and that goes all the way down so that everyone in that ecosystem is supported. Finally, make sure you remember the boundary between being an advocate and a loved one and being a therapist. Both of those spheres are incredibly important in the healing journey, but when they cross over too much and you try to take on too much responsibility of a therapist, that's when you start to get hurt. And that's when you start to become a worse support system for your loved one. Now, to recap everything I've shared today, we started off by talking about some things you shouldn't say, some things that can actually be detrimental to the healing process. Then we talked about the fact that they are still normal, so treat them as normally as possible and validate their emotions as well. Next, we talked about what it meant to hold the space for someone, which is the most important part of being a good support system. And after we shared some types of therapies that you can refer them to, we also talked about why it's important to keep yourself safe and a few methods for doing that. Now, that is all I have for you guys tonight in terms of content. I so appreciate your time and attention tonight, and I hope you found this valuable. If you would like to reach out to me personally with questions or to say hi or to send a picture of your dog, whatever that is, feel free to do that. My email, website, and Instagram are all on the screen. That being said, I do want to turn it over for question and answer right now. So if you have any questions, things you need me to clarify, things that are kind of related but unrelated, any sort of questions at all, feel free to go ahead and post those in the chat and I will get to answering those. If there's no questions though, and of course I'll stick around for a couple minutes, but if there are no questions, then again, thank you so much for your time and attention tonight, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week. Okay, question here. If you are in a relationship and have mental health struggles, what is the healthiest way to express these struggles to your partner without becoming dependent or putting too much responsibility on them? That's a really important question to ask yourself, but I also want to challenge that belief a little bit, because if someone is in a relationship with you on a level that is deep and there's mutual love and affection there, they want to support you. They want to see you at your best. So I would start with something small. Start with, I don't know what your specific struggles are, but start with something like how you're really anxious for an upcoming test, or you're worried about your family dynamic when you go home for Christmas. Something that's maybe a little bit more surface level. See how they respond to that, how they're able to support you, and then move deeper and deeper as you gain a little bit more trust in their ability to be a support system for you. Of course, like I said, I can speak for myself and can speak for other people that I've spoken to, that they honestly want to help. They want to be a support system for the people they love. So I would encourage you to just start small and start opening up a little bit, because you'll probably be pleasantly surprised about how this person wants to support you. Next question here, does I understand fall more under the category of things not to say, as it can sound as if we are diverting the topic, or does it fall more under the category of things we should say as it shows empathy? I personally don't like saying I understand, because that can kind of do the same thing as I know what you're going through, where it diverts the attention onto you. I would go for something like, I see that this is really painful for you. I cannot even imagine what you're going through right now. I can tell that this is really hurtful and important to you. Something like that, where you're still focusing on them. You're still acknowledging their feelings and their emotions and talking about them instead of saying, I understand, I know what you're going through, I can, whatever. It also really does depend on how you say it, right? If you're like, oh my gosh, I totally understand, and then just launch into the story about yourself, generally not helpful. But if you're like, Sarah, again, making up a name here, but Sarah, I really understand what you're going through. I can tell this is really hurtful for you. That's going to come across more empathetic. So tone is important, but I would generally stay away from things that are like, I know what you're going through, or I understand. Does anyone else have any questions here before we round it out for tonight? And of course, if there's anything you want to ask privately or after this presentation, please feel free to reach out over social media or email. I'd be happy to chat there as well. But if we don't have any other questions, Annie and Hannah, I will turn it back over to you for any closing remarks.
Thank you so much for joining us, Jessi. I think that this was something that is useful for all of us, because I think whether we ourselves are experiencing some struggles with mental health or those we love around us, particularly in the middle of a pandemic, I think that this is going to be something that's so incredibly useful to the students in our community. So thank you so much for your time. I'm so glad that we got to have you back. And I really look forward to posting this in places that our students can continue to refer back to it.
Of course. Well, thank you so much for having me tonight. It was so much fun to be here.